Welcome to part 5, or belonging. Bringing people together in a community. In the last 4 sections, we went through the following steps: identifying our fears and phobias, sharing our scars and wounds, breaking the barriers to prevent communication, including those who have disabilities, and creating accommodations for them. Finally, we need to bring about a community or a belonging place. In this section, we are going to continue with the advocacy movement or disability movement, and still some of the pitfalls that occur in the disability movement. We've already discussed the pitfalls that occur with the religious aspect, and we've talked about the pitfalls in the medical aspect. One of the biggest being, how do you classify a disability? Where do you put them? And the best treatment options may not be a one-size-fits-all. And how do you listen to the patient without considering them a patient specifically, but as a person? Now in this section, we are getting more into advocacy and some of the pitfalls that can happen in this movement. One of the biggest being, are we creating exclusivity in the advocacy movement intentionally or not? And how can we break that by creating a belonging place for both sides of the issue? Those who are considered able-bodied and those who have a disability. So now we're going to continue with the laws. We are getting one step closer to the Americans with Disabilities Act. In 1981, there was a Baby Doe Squad created after the family of Baby Doe was denied life-saving surgery for their son who has Down syndrome. Telecommunications for Those with Disabilities Act provided telecommunications devices in public buildings for those who are blind, deaf, and or hard of hearing. By 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. This law stated that no person with a disability is denied a job on the basis of his or her disability. Buildings are made handicap accessible, vehicles are made handicap accessible, and you cannot deny a person a pass on a train, plane, bus, or taxi. Restrooms are made handicap accessible. However, not everyone is on board with it. There's still loopholes and the law isn't perfect. In 1993, Holland versus Sacramento City Unified School District verifies students with disabilities are able to attend with non-disabled students. There would be a term that would come out of this called assimilation. That means taking students with disabilities and putting them into classrooms with children who are considered able-bodied to let them learn side by side. 1995, PBS had its debut documentary series called When Billy Broke His Head and Other Tales of Wonder, looking into the world of disabilities and the disability rights movement. Helen versus Snyder was a landmark case to allow those who have a disability not to be placed in a nursing home but have the option of home health care. In 1996, Not Dead Yet organized to counteract the actions of Dr. Kevorkian and the Right to Die movement. This prevents the do not resuscitate on those with severe mental disabilities and pushing them out of the way. It gives those with disabilities, with severe mental disabilities, a right to choose. But in 1999, there was a big change to the Americans with Disabilities Act. There was 3 big Supreme Court cases to rule in reversal of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It proves that those who have hidden disabilities like diabetes and epilepsy are not necessarily protected against discrimination. This brings up a big question. How disabled can a disability be? How do you classify that? A lot of disability advocates are protesting the ruling and fight for clarification. If you've ever had to apply for Social Security or disability funds, it gets very tricky because a lot of it has to classify how far a disability is, because there are people who, like myself, who are in the middle, and they have to decide how disabled is a disability. And with this court case, it sort of brings this into question. A person can be considered disabled, but not so disabled that they can't work, and yet they're disabled enough that they can't apply for certain jobs. They're considered too healthy, but yet disabled enough that they fall right in the middle. And there are thousands of those who fall in that category with hidden disabilities. And even so, that have more mobile physical limitations. By 2005, Not Dead Yet protests again the neglect and removal of a feeding tube from Terry Chabot. She never indicated a do not resuscitate order or a living will, but she ended up dying from starvation and neglect. The Disabilities and Media Alliance Project is born, and the ADA is revised in 2010. This includes a don't ask, don't tell policy. Prospective employees don't have to share the nature of his or her disability, and the employers are not allowed to ask in turn. But this creates a big conundrum. How can a business better accommodate to the needs of workers with disabilities if the prospective employee won't talk about it? Now that you have done the lunch challenge, which I hope a number of you have done, we're going to go to belonging, an activity involving belonging. Now, if you've done the lunch challenge, as I've given you in the previous episode, I'm going to ask you to talk to that person again that you've had lunch with. You can call them on the phone. You can send them a card or a letter. You could go in person and visit them. And I want you to do the following. Go up to them, call them, or write them a letter and tell them what makes them so special. And how much, and if you missed them, right, be honest, don't lie, right, if you've missed them or not, right, that you've missed them, if you have. And I want you to take a few minutes and jot it down, what you like about that person. And after you finish, write it down beforehand or practice. Go up to that person and talk to them. And let them know what makes them special. You can write it down, or you could call them or visit them in person and tell them what makes them special and let them know that they belong. After you do that, I want you to think about this. How did it feel giving that note to someone, sending that note to someone, or if you've called them on the phone or went to visit them in person, how did it feel telling that person that you want them to, that they were special, that they belonged, or re-invited them again to something, to do another activity with them, to help them be a part of something? Did it break down your initial fears or discomfort? And do you still have any left? And if you do, what is it? I hope you will get a little closer to that belonging and talking about that. I know that there will never be such a thing as a perfect belonging place per se, but I hope we will get at least some tastes or some efforts and strides to be made towards creating a more belonging place. And a number of firsts occurred. Like, there was the first summer space program created by NASA to allow those with disabilities to join. You can have, if you've watched the film A Smile as Big as the Moon, you should watch it. It's the true story about how that came to appear. There's also the first studio company to hire people with disabilities for film projects. Do you know which one it is? It's Disney. DreamWorks followed suit in a short time thereafter. Disney's first film with film animators who have disabilities was Finding Nemo. Tim Burton becomes the first successful movie director. His string of hits include Frankenweenie, Edward Scissorhands, and The Nightmare Before Christmas. Bill Merton, an athlete in a wheelchair, appears on a box of Wheaties in 1989. NBC becomes the first network to use closed captioning. Sears Roebuck and Company sells decoders for closed captioning in the 1980s. There was a mandate by Sim Skinner to put lifts on buses. And Dr. Temple Grandin becomes the first high-functioning person with someone with high-functioning autism to graduate from college. She designs a food handling system, and she's the first and most well-known successful person with autism. Jerry Jewell becomes the first comedian with a disability. She makes her debut on the TV show The Facts of Life as Blair's cousin, Jerry. Chandra Khan becomes the first female with a disability to be awarded the Humanitarian Award for Women's College Hockey and her work for epilepsy awareness. Speechless becomes the first television show to successfully feature a character with Parkinson's, and it's a comedy. And the Mary character is played by an actor who has Parkinson's. His name is Micah Fowler. Born This Way is the first reality series to feature people with Down syndrome in a community setting on A&E, and it wins an Emmy for Best Reality Series. TLC is the first network to feature shows centered on people with disabilities. Its first show is Little People, Big World, considered controversial by some because of its portrayal of those with dwarfism. The Mining is the first conglomerate of a newspaper supported by a conglomerate of newspapers, including online newspaper, including the Washington Post and the New York Times, which allows individuals with disabilities to write their stories, including the good and bad, and not letting the media dictate it for them. Also, Ability Magazine becomes the first online magazine in 2012 to talk about issues for those with disabilities. And while there have been advances, there are still problems that keep popping up, like the Right to Die movement. And there's still fears and phobias of those with mental illnesses. There's common myths of mental illnesses that include violence, drug abuse, and suicidal thoughts. And there's plenty of studies out there on the internet to support it. There's still discrimination against those with hidden disabilities. There's cuts in funds for disability services and care. And there's medical scares like the anti-vaccine movement. There's sensationalism and sentimentality implemented by social media, news, stories, films, and television. There's also a lack of actors and actresses with disabilities that play starring roles in scripts, dialogue, and discussion of disabilities. 80% of films and television shows have actors that are not disabled in starring roles. Only 20% feature people with disabilities in starring roles. And there's a big one in church. Through the Roof, a nonprofit organization, did a survey with those who have a disability. Research showed that many churches found an abundance of spiritual wisdom and maturity, but one major problem: not many leadership roles for those who have a disability. For a full research study, check out throughtheroof.org/what'syourexperience. But why don't we have more leaders who have a disability? And what are we so afraid of? But there is plenty of room for progress. Here, for your last homework assignment, there are shows, films, and documentaries worth discussing. One of Tim Burton's most successful films, Edward Scissorhands, the first film with animators who were on the autism spectrum, Finding Nemo. First Do No Harm, about the ketogenic diet for those who have epilepsy. Dr. Temple Grandin, a biography about Dr. Temple Grandin. Inside Out, Not Dead Yet, the TV show Scorpion, or Born This Way. These are just a few you can choose from. You can watch any one of these films or shows and discuss the director's point of view, acting, writing, and how it portrays the disability positively and negatively. I'm going to leave you with a thought by Jonathan Swinton. The problem we have with the society is a real emphasis, and quite a right emphasis, on inclusion. I think at one level, that's fine. However, inclusion is simply not enough. To include people in society is just to have them there. All we have to do is make the church accessible, have the right political structures, make sure people have a cup of tea at the end of the service or whatever. There is a big difference between inclusion and belonging. To belong, you have to be missed. There's something really, really important about that. People need to long for you, to want you to be there. When you're not there, they should go looking for you. When things are wrong, people should be outraged, absolutely outraged, that people are doing things against people with disabilities. If you want to know more about how to help those with disabilities and make them belong, here's a few resources I have for you. You can check out the Disabled World's website, disabledworld.com, Disability History webpage, yodisabledproud.org. You can check out the Smithsonian Institute's Disability Visual Arts Everybody exhibit site, everybody.si.edu. And you can also check out the Parallels in History page from the Minnesota government on mental health disabilities. minnesotamn.gov/mnddc/parallels/index.html. And don't worry, if you're looking for it, if you're looking for these resources, I'll have them posted on my Facebook page so you can find them on your own time. I also have to recommend for you Stephanie Black, an author about a poetry book of disabilities. You can also read Dr. Temple Grandin's The Autistic Brain, George Ferris's Disability Poetry book. I also recommend a liturgist podcast called Ableism. It's definitely worth a listen. And you can also check out a nonprofit called Johnny and Friends Through the Roof, and Steph Griffin's book, Same Ocean, Different Boat. These are some very good resources that you can research on your own time. I will also have for you some of the stories that I have met, people that I have met and their stories. They'll be shared on my Facebook page too. And you can check out some of their YouTube stories. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to walk through these 5 stages. Identifying the fears and phobias, sharing our scars and wounds, breaking the barriers that prevent communication, including those who have a disability and accommodating to their needs, and finally, bringing about a community setting or belonging place for those with disabilities, and in an able-bodied society. I hope you will watch this and share this with your friends, community, and others. So how can you take these 5 steps and apply them to your own life? Well, simple. One of the easiest things you can do is to get educated about disabilities. You can visit any disability resource website like disabledworld.com and research about a disability that you're interested in. Or, even better, get to know a person who has a disability. Next, after you get to know a person with a disability, you can connect with them. Go out, take up the lunch challenge. Get to know them a bit better. Start hanging out with them. I'm not asking you to be their best friend, but get to know them. Also, if you don't know anyone in your community who has a disability, volunteer at a local nonprofit. There's plenty of nonprofits out there that can use your help. You don't have to donate your money, but it's important that you donate your time, your efforts, your resources. Donate yourself. There's many great nonprofits out there. One of the nonprofits I support is the Epilepsy Foundation of America. You don't have to support the one that I do, but it's a great one. Or if you want something that's just as relevant, you can contact with the National Suicide Prevention, and you can volunteer to be on part of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and help somebody who is considering suicide. Or anything to do with mental health issues, which is a very big thing that's going on in our society today. Also, if you still don't know what to do, besides getting educated and learning and connecting and after you take your time and get connected and plugged into a nonprofit, I suggest that you get active. Get active in helping those with disabilities and working together with them, listening to them, getting to know their stories and sharing them with other people in your community. After you do that, hopefully you will be more connected in your communities, churches, societies, in your local society. I know this won't happen overnight. This will take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy on both sides. If those who are able-bodied don't listen to those who have disabilities, it won't work. If those who have disabilities don't think those who are able-bodied are good enough to listen to, it won't work. It takes both sides to listen to one another, to accommodate to one another, to accommodate to the needs of those who have disabilities, to figure out how to make things accessible, to figure out all the kinks and where they need to go from there. It will take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but hopefully we will finally reach the belonging place. It has been a privilege to share these stages with you, and I hope you will apply them, and I hope you will work together. If you're interested in more of what I have to say, feel free to email me at plasmnetic, plasmnetic@gmail.com, or you can look me up on Facebook at The Belonging Place, which is facebook.com/no-one-is-ignored. And I hope you will get to know more about those with disabilities. And if you don't know anybody with a disability, guess what? You just found someone who has one. Me! So, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope you're willing to share this. Take care, and do it for those who can't.
I was born by the river, oh, in a little tent, oh, and just like the river I've been running ever since. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Change gon' come. Oh, yes, yeah. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Change gon' come.